Buying tickets to sports and concerts can be way too complicated, but there is a better, simpler way to buy. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events. And right now, get a $20 rebate on your first purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code Barnwell today.
Welcome to the Bill Barnwell Show. I'm Bill Barnwell of ESPN. We are here on a Monday, October 16th, 2017, to talk about Week 7. That's not true. It's Week 6. I don't know what the weeks are. Come on. This is a tough gig out here. Week 6 of the NFL season, and joining me to do that is someone who does know which week it is, because he's a lot more qualified to do this than I am, Sheil Kapadia of The Athletic. Sheil, how are you?
I think I probably just got more sleep than you as you were writing your Aaron Rodgers column for this morning. So you're excused. Don't worry about it.
I wish you were my editor. I wish that was something I could rely on, unfortunately. But no, I appreciate that. And yeah, it was a really interesting week, even outside of the Aaron Rodgers injury. I did write about that. Don't know if we're going to get to that a ton in today's podcast. We'll get to it a little bit probably here and there. But what we're going to do today to recap the Sunday that just passed is we're going to go through some superlatives. We're going to go through 10 superlatives when it comes to Week 6 of the NFL season. Let's start with the most obvious one. Let's start with the best victory we saw on Sunday. So, Sheil, who would you pick? Who would be your choice for best win of Week 6?
I am going to go with the signature game of the week and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot to talk about with that game, obviously, but just speaking big picture-wise, you know, this is a team that I feel like has had a lot of drama this season,
sure.
Especially, you know, whether it's Ben Roethlisberger or Antonio Brown or some of the other stuff that went on, and we can get into the specifics, but I just thought that physically they kind of outpowered the best team in the league in the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger was only hit 2 times all day long. They obviously ran the football very effectively. They shut down Kareem Hunt. So they won on both sides of the ball up front against the best team in the league. And, you know, I'm not ready to say that this means, wow, the Steelers are, you know, better than the Chiefs and they're a Super Bowl favorite or anything like that. I think they're probably still going to be an inconsistent team, but I thought that was a big win for them and an impressive win for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in going on Scott Van Pelt's show last week, I talked about the Steelers, and I said, you know, the offense is struggling, and sort of everything's fair to say that, but the defense, you know, people are underestimating how good this defense has been. I think at that point they were second in terms of points allowed per possession, and granted, the fourth quarter, the Chiefs had plenty of success moving the football, but for the first 3 quarters of the game, this defense was really phenomenal. I really thought they did a wonderful job of shutting down one of the best offenses in football, and then you know, things could have gone differently in the fourth quarter. We'll get to some of those plays later on, I think. But it did seem like, overall, this was a impressive performance. Not a perfect performance. There were still some flaws you would see here and there, but I did think it was a very solid game from the Steelers. I'm going to say the New York Giants, who, just given the circumstances, I mean, they had nothing to play for. They're 0-5. They're down 9 starters, depending on who you're counting as starters, but at least several starters against a Broncos team that's coming off a bye. It just would have been so easy for the Giants to quit here and not give a full effort and just, you know, not to give 100%. But they manhandled the Broncos. They played a team that's tough to beat in Denver, and it looked like the Broncos were the team that were playing for nothing. The Denver running game had 17 carries for 46 yards. The Giants ran the ball on what had been one of the best run defenses in all of football so far this season. They dared the Broncos to pass, and they just couldn't move the ball. They had 394 yards at the end of the game, but 157 of those yards came in the fourth quarter, down multiple scores. So 11 batted passes, a pick 6, held the Broncos to 7 points and 4 red zone trips. Just thought that was a gutty performance from a team that really showed something. Even if they're not going to be a competitive team, even if they don't make the playoffs, I feel like it showed a lot about how much pride they have in that locker room.
Yes, definitely. It was unexpected. They were a huge underdog. You mentioned the Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie stuff during the week. Now, I have to ask you this, because me being in Philadelphia here, you know I've talked to some Eagles fans, some readers who really thought that this Giants team was just going to luck out and that they were going to be terrible the whole season and that they were going to clean house and that they were going to get the number 1 overall pick and all of a sudden they'd have a franchise quarterback right away. So if you are a Giants fan right now, are you happy? Are you prideful? How are you rooting for the rest of the season to go? Are you still holding out hope that you can go on some kind of crazy, miraculous run, or it's tough to gauge what that mindset would be right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fascinating question, and I think it comes down to, if you're a Giants fan, maybe you're hoping, well, really, there's more than one franchise quarterback prospect in this class. It seems like, at least from the little I know, I would not pretend to be a college football expert, but just based on what I've read, it does seem like there's a crop of talent even beyond Sam Darnold, where there could be 3, possibly even 4 quarterbacks who go in the top 15 picks and end up being viable franchise quarterback options. So I kind of don't mind the middle ground. I don't necessarily want them to finish 7-9 if I'm a Giants fan, but I don't think that 4-12 is necessarily out of the question at this point, even after this victory, and necessarily would not be the worst outcome, and would be, would preclude you from getting a franchise quarterback or having a shot at a franchise quarterback. So I don't know. I also don't think Eli Manning is necessarily finished, although I think he is obviously declining. But it could be a thing where he does have one more year in him and does end up playing at least as a starting quarterback for most of 2018. So we'll see. But I do think that, I don't want them to go 0-16. I think 0-16 would be sad. It'd be less sad than 1-15. I think 0-16 is strangely better than 1-15, but I do think it'd be good for them to win some games. On the flip side of that,
at the very least, you get that one kind of Monday morning feeling, after what has been a very long 5 weeks for them.
It's very fair. What about worst loss? Who would you pick for the flip side of this superlative?
I am going to go with the Atlanta Falcons.
Really?
I thought that they just, maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's not like crushes their season or anything like that. They're still 3-2. They're still going to be in the mix, but I just thought they gave that game away. I mean, I'm hearing people give the Dolphins a little bit too much credit this morning than they deserve. The Falcons were up 17-0 in that game, and then they had kind of a shanked punt that gave the Dolphins a short field. They had the botched snap on a punt that gave the Dolphins another short field. They had a 26-yard pass interference penalty, which was one of the bigger plays of the game. And then another huge play of the game was Grady Jarrett roughing the passer penalty on Jay Cutler. I know you posted the funny gif of poor Jay Cutler, maybe wondering why he decided to come back and play football if this is the result, taking those hits on a weekly basis. But that was just huge because that negated an interception, and the Dolphins ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive. So I just thought they made so many mistakes in that game in the second half, 17-0 at home against a team that I don't think is really good. The one area where I will give the Dolphins credit for sure is that game-ending interception. I thought that was just a tremendous play by Cordrea Tankersley, batted the football, and then Rashad Jones came down with the game-winning interception. So Dolphins deserve credit there. Jay Ajayi ran hard. So there were some kind of glimmers of reasons why they should deserve credit. But overall, I thought this was just a game that the Falcons gave away when they really should be sitting here at 4-1 on a Monday morning.
See, we were going to do luckiest break as a superlative later on, and I was going to say that Cutler pick was my selection for luckiest break.
Okay.
But I'm with you. Obviously, we'll get to that in a little bit. But I do think that it was the Dolphins showed a little bit here and there, but a lot of things had to go their way for them to get to the point where they could launch that comeback and have that pass defense to come up with a victory. I'm going to say the Ravens, where you just think about what happened in that game. Since 2002, teams with 2 or more return touchdowns are 163-30. They win almost 85% of the time. They're facing Mitch Trubisky, who, he had that one nice pass in the game where he eluded pressure and stepped up and made a nice throw. But otherwise, he had 8 completions. This was not an impressive game for Mitch Trubisky. He has not looked very good so far. Joe Flacco averaged 4.4 yards per attempt. They averaged fewer yards through the air than they did on the ground. He threw 2 picks that weren't really his fault. One was dropped by Brashad Perriman into an interception, and the other one was a nicer play by Kyle Fuller. Ended up turning into a pick 6. It just, there's so many things in this game that just didn't make sense. They ran a middle screen to Mike Wallace with no timeouts and 12 seconds left to set up a game-winning field goal try. In overtime, they have great field position on defense, and then Eric Weddle decides to swat at the football instead of making a tackle attempt, and it turns into a 53-yard gain. Sets the Bears up for what ended up being the game-winning field goal. It just, there's so many ways they ended up costing themselves this game, and I just felt like it was a killer blow for a team that, most of the time they should beat the Bears at home.
Bill, we need a name for this, because I don't know if you felt the same way, but when you're watching Red Zone, it feels like every week there's a game where you're just like, no, do not go back to this game. It is so ugly. It is so boring. It is so aesthetically, I don't know if it's like the stadium and the camera angles, but everything about this game when they went to it, I was like, no, please save me. Go to anything else right now. It was just so ugly, that football game. And you're absolutely right that was a terrible loss. I was looking at Flacco's numbers overall, and that to me may be the toughest offense in the NFL to watch right now. He's averaging 5.4 yards per attempt. That's 30th, 66.1 passer rating. That's above Deshaun Kaiser, only above Deshaun Kaiser in the NFL. When they have the football, and this is saying something because the Bears certainly are fun to watch when they have the football offensively, but there's something about that Ravens offense, and it's like multiple years now at this point that I just cannot stand watching them right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you watch the Bears, at least you're saying, okay, well, we have Mitch Trubisky, who isn't good yet, but at least you're going to maybe see something that makes you think, oh, maybe he's going to be good. But Joe Flacco, with this Ravens offense, just so many years now, where whether it's different receivers, different running backs, offensive line pieces moving in and out, it's just such a frustrating offense from week to week. What about best individual performance?
Well, this is sticking with that game, so I guess I sound like a little bit of a hypocrite here. But I thought that Jordan Howard. I mean, you just mentioned that Bears offense. Trubisky completes 8 passes the entire game. This is a game where the opponent knows that you just don't want your rookie quarterback to make a mistake. You're going to run the football over and over and over again. And Howard had the one play where I think it was the end of regulation where he ran out of bounds. And the announcers were like, what is he doing? And to be honest, I was thinking that too. And then just reviewing this and preparing for the podcast, that was like carry number 32 or something. Yeah. So I have to give him a little bit of an excuse there. He ends with 187 yards on 36 carries. But obviously the highlight was there in overtime. I mean, they're backed up at their own 7-yard line. This looks like 100% headed for a tie this game because of how bad the offenses were. And on his 33rd carry of the day, he breaks Eric Weddle's tackle. Weddle tries to kind of strip the football there, which probably wasn't a bad move because he knew the defense had to put them in position to score. But Howard breaks the tackle, 53-yard run, sets them up for the game-winning field goal, kind of saves the game for them right there. So I just thought it was, a 36-carry game in today's NFL is just kind of so unheard of. Yeah. And I thought he battled, and he had to be so fatigued there in overtime and came up with a huge play. So there were a lot of options, but that's who I went with. Who'd you go with?
I went with Cam Jordan, who...
Okay, I like it.
That game was the opposite when it came to red zone, because whenever that game came on, I'm like, oh, we're going to see a defensive touchdown, we're going to see a long touchdown, we're going to see something absolutely insane. I'm really into this. He had 2 sacks, 3 knockdowns, a pick 6 on like the 1-yard line, which was one of 2 defensive line touchdowns with passes within the inside their own 5-yard line in that game alone on Sunday. One of the sacks was really impressive. He just literally got underneath Ricky Wagner and pushed him backwards into Matthew Stafford for a sack. I don't even know if Cam Jordan even touched Matthew Stafford. Literally just bull rushed Ricky Wagner and knocked Stafford over with Ricky Wagner. So I just thought, obviously it's very easy to knock the Saints defense. I'm not going to pretend I haven't done it almost on a weekly basis for years now. And I'm not going to say it was unfairly deserved, but one of the few bright spots over the last few years has been Cam Jordan, and he's playing at a super high level this year. And with their, I'm afraid to say defensive resurgence, but they have been a lot better on defense the past 3 weeks, with a lot of the Lions' points being related to defensive and return touchdowns. But I do think their defense is playing better, and Cam Jordan's been playing at a very high level. I think a Pro Bowl, even possibly an All-Pro caliber level so far this season. So I am going to give him some credit there. What do you have for craziest moment?
It may have been, now this isn't, I hope I'm not taking yours in my preemptive comment here, because just on that game you just mentioned, when I think it was Ashawn Robinson, right, had the interception, and it cut it to, I think, 1 touchdown at that point. That was the craziest moment to me, because you're right. I felt like I didn't get enough of this game on red zone. There was too much Ravens-Bears, and all of a sudden I'm looking up, and the score keeps changing, and it was 45-10, cuts it to 45-38. So that absolutely was a crazy moment where I wondered maybe I should just put my full attention to this game. But I kind of went with the obvious one here, and that was Austin Seferian-Jenkins, the touchdown getting overturned in the Jets-Patriots game, 8:31 left, would have made it 24-21 Patriots. I wish I could give you some clear opinion here on what I think happened and what should have happened. I usually just go to the great Kevin Seifert of ESPN.com in these situations, and I read what he wrote because he's like the rules guru. And, it sounds like they ruled that Seferian-Jenkins lost control of the ball, I guess, a second time, and he only recovered after his knee landed out of bounds. So that's one. I do appreciate the arrogance sometimes from the officials, where in that Kevin Seifert story, Tony Correnti said, quote, "It was pretty obvious." I guess he was like one of two people in the entire world who thought it was pretty obvious what should have happened there. I really don't know whether my anger should be directed towards the officials or whether they made the right call, and my anger should be directed just towards the NFL as a whole for, once again, these rules were kind of, you just take a step back and try to employ common sense, and you have no idea how this ends up in a touchback for the Patriots.
What do you think? I asked this on Twitter, and I don't know what the right answer is. What do you think the rule should be if the offense fumbles the ball at the pylon in that situation, fumbles the ball through the end zone? Should it be a ball on the 1 yard line? What do you think the right rule should be?
I saw one of your followers suggested taking it back to the 20, right?
Yes.
So I would be fine with that. I would be fine with them getting at the 1. Honestly, I'm not even sure that this was that's what happened here.
That's the problem.
Maybe it's clear to other people that it clearly was a fumble that went out of the end zone. I mean, I certainly could not tell that, and they ruled it a touchdown on the field. So if you're talking about irrefutable evidence, I did not see that either. I thought it was really funny how Scott Hansen thought his production team made a mistake. I don't know if you caught that when this play happened, but he's like, wait, no, 24, the Patriots have the ball? No, you got that wrong. That was a touchdown, right? And they're like, no, this actually, the touchdown was taken off the board, and it's the Patriots' ball. So I don't know. What do you think happened? What was your take there?
Oh, I don't know. I guess. Yeah. I mean, I assumed it was they saw the fumble, they didn't see a clear recovery, and then they hit the pylon, so I think they assumed it was just fumbled out of the end zone, and the last possession was by the offense. But I don't know. If they had ruled it a fumble on the field and couldn't overturn it, I would think that was kind of crappy. But at least I would be like, okay, well, there's not know what happened down there. There's no way on the planet Earth that you can possibly say that was clearly a touchback. There's just there's no possible way to say the evidence is strong enough to overturn the touchdown call on the field. So I do think there was a fumble. I don't know if necessarily it should have been. It should have been called a touchdown if there was no ruling on the field, but I do think that you can't possibly overturn that. I'm going to say, for my craziest moment, I had the Antonio Brown catch, which I think you mentioned earlier on, where it was the ridiculous sort of, play where it probably should have been picked off on a deep pass. Antonio Brown did an incredible job of controlling his body, and then fended off Brad Sorensen, and then sprinted upfield for what ended up being the game-winning touchdown. Let me ask you, though, in terms of other Steelers news, what do you think about the Martavis Bryant trade request?
I don't know what to make of that right now. I know he put something out there on Twitter, but, usually in these situations, at least in my experience, when something comes out, it's either a team or player obviously wants it out there and to kind of get feelers and let everyone in the league know. I know just when I was in Seattle when the Richard Sherman stuff came out, I mean, there are reasons why stuff is leaked, and there are reasons why things are not leaked. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if it had some legs to it, and this is kind of a heads up to every team in the NFL, hey, if you want this guy, now is a pretty good time to call.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't necessarily think there's going to be a huge market for a guy who, of course, multiple suspensions, doesn't appear to be getting on well in Pittsburgh. Obviously has a ton of talent, but it does seem like, if the Steelers are going to trade him, they're going to be selling low on a guy who is really talented, and so it's hard to figure that there's going to be a good fit there in terms of value. Let's finish up before the break here with biggest surprise of Week 6.
Mine was Adrian Peterson. I did not think that he had that in him. I don't know. I guess some people did. It seemed like yesterday they thought the change of scenery could really help. But, I covered that Eagles-Cardinals game last week, and the Cardinals just looked like a team that was going nowhere. They didn't even try to run the football because they didn't have the personnel, and all of a sudden he comes in, 26 carries, 134 yards. Really could have been a bigger day. He had a very long run. Yep. Called back at one point, and it's not just the numbers. It was the jump cuts and making defenders miss, and the power and the speed. It really was kind of vintage. I thought Adrian Peterson. I don't know that he can do this for the entire season, but I remember thinking before the year started, when I was looking at the Cardinals, I thought their identity was going to change a little bit, where it was ride David Johnson as much as you can, play good defense, and then take some shots downfield. But I really thought it was going to kind of be those two first things. And again, I don't know that he can sustain this for an entire season. But the Bucs were sixth in rushing DVOA entering the game, and Adrian Peterson, I felt like just kind of saved their season. They're now 3-3. I still don't trust their offensive line. I don't trust their special teams. But at least they're still in the mix here. It was just so weird seeing like Larry Fitzgerald and Adrian Peterson just hugging and yucking it up. These guys in their mid-30s who are just absolutely torching the Bucs on one afternoon. So I thought that was a pretty fun performance by him.
Yeah, I don't know if I can pick anybody else. I mean, it's such an enormous surprise. I wrote about him before the week, and I said, maybe it'll be better than what they had. And he had bad blocking in New Orleans, and it's worth a shot, right? The price was so low that it makes sense to go after a guy like Adrian Peterson for a team that's really designed to win now. And did not see this coming. I will say I left him on my fantasy football bench for Wayne Gallman, which I'm really good at fantasy football, as you can tell. And I just thought, the offensive line played better. I thought their play-action game was better. I thought that they were just more effective on offense across the board, and I think he felt like such a solid fit. And even if he's not going to be this guy the rest of the way, it does seem like he is going to be just a meaningful part of this offense and an upgrade on Kerwin Williams and Chris Johnson the rest of the way. Let me ask you this, though. Since we picked the same player, let me ask you about surprise of the season. And let me throw a name out there who you're following pretty closely. Is Nelson Aguilar the most surprising player in the NFL so far this season, outside of maybe the guys in Los Angeles?
You know what? I might even give it to another player on the Eagles as far as what my expectations were. LeGarrette Blount. Mm-hmm. I thought this guy, Aguilar, don't get me wrong, Aguilar's had a great bounce back season. He's playing really well. He's solidified what they're doing in the slot. But Bill, I couldn't make any sense of what the Eagles did from a running back perspective in the off season, and all of a sudden, this guy, I don't know if Blount leads the NFL in yards per carry. He's in the top 5. He leads the NFL in yards after contact. He's actually fun to watch, like he's bulldozing defenders at times. That's one, just considering that he's in his 30s and coming off a 299 carry season, and in week 2, they didn't give him a single touch, so it was clear the coaching staff was seeing what everyone else was seeing, that, hey, maybe this guy doesn't have it. And now all of a sudden, their run blocking has been good, but he's given them just a huge boost in the running game. So that's the one kind of off the cuff that comes to mind.
Yeah, for sure. I want to blame you on Blount. I'm someone who, after week 2, I was very satisfied and saying, everyone's an idiot. Nobody should pick him up. He'll be back on the Patriots by week 12, and then he's been great ever since. So in many ways, I am wrong on a week-to-week basis. We have to hit a break, though. We'll be back with more Bill Barnwell Show here in a moment. Hey, guys, I've got some interesting facts for you here from the folks at Gillette. Did you know the tip of a Gillette razor blade is measured on an atomic scale? That means their blade edges are thinner than a single brain cell. And that precision is the work of many brain cells. The hundreds of members of Gillette's research and development team have spent over 4,700 years combined working to make your shave closer and more comfortable. And that's longer than the Egyptian pyramids have been around. And while over 1,000 craftsmen and women in Boston are busy making your blades, another team is putting your blades through more than 60 extremely strict and precise quality checks. If the blades fail just one of these tests, it does not leave the factory. In other words, the hardworking people at Gillette never stop working to make your blades better. And now, that includes the price tag, because you can get Gillette blades at their lowest prices in years. See for yourself at GilletteOnDemand.com. Gillette, the best a man can get. Pressing applies to select products and is at the sole discretion of the retailer.
Hey girl, have you done something new with your scales? Using new moisturizer? Nice. It really brings out the hazel in your eyes. Oh, hold on. Are you using whitening strips too? Your fangs look good, girl. Really good.
A really charming snake charmer? Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
Wait, what? Have you been doing Pilates too?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
All right, welcome back to the Bill Barnwell Show. I'm Bill Barnwell of ESPN, joined by Sheil Kapadia of The Athletic, talking about Week 6 of the NFL season. Got it right that time. Getting my weeks correct. We have 5 more superlatives to get to here on the show. Let's start with most inexplicable decision. Sheil, what do you think?
You know, I'm all for thinking outside the box and challenging conventional wisdom and all that, but Doug Marrone and the Jacksonville Jaguars, down 27-17 with 1:12 left, attempting a 54-yard field goal. We can argue about whether it makes sense to kick the field goal quickly and then try to get the touchdown. That's kind of a separate argument. But to stop at 54 yards, it was a 2nd and 8, I believe. And Bill, the funniest part about this is I don't know if you saw the previous play. So there was 1:30 left. They could have kicked a 56-yarder. You know, they didn't do that. They ran an offensive play. They picked up 2 yards on a short pass near the sideline, ran 18 seconds off the clock, and then thought, okay, now is the time to try a 54-yard field goal. So I think it's always good to kind of evaluate process in these situations, obviously not just the results. And I'm just having a hard time with, like, someone in the analytics department say, hey, get it to the 54-yard mark. That's when we want to stop and kick the field goal. This gives us the best chance to win. So I was Googling this morning, and I couldn't find if Doug Marrone gave a good explanation or not. I certainly didn't see it out there, but that to me just seemed like a pretty baffling decision.
It did seem bizarre. The only explanation I can think of is maybe he went to Jason Myers before the game and said, hey, what's your range? And Jason Myers said, 55 and in. I got you. We're good. And he was at 56, and he's like, all right, well, we got to get a yard. And then they got 2, and they were like, oh, wow, bonus. Now it's a guarantee. It's a lock. We got to get this field goal in while we have a chance. So, yeah, I mean, we talked about this with Brian Burke on an earlier episode of the Nickel Package earlier this season. You know, there is evidence saying you can go for the field goal first in some situations. It can be better. I don't think you ever want to be taking a 54-yard field goal with a kicker who's not Justin Tucker, who's not Dan Bailey and Jason Myers. It's you want to get closer if you're going to take the field goal first, and you want to basically have a guaranteed 3 points if you're going to try that. I'm going to say I had the Jordan Howard play where I do fault Jordan Howard for going out of bounds. I think that was obviously not the best decision, but why are they even running the ball in this situation? It's 3rd down, 35 seconds left or so. It could be 34 or 33, but it's under 40 seconds left. The Ravens have no timeouts. You are not moving the ball at all. You're playing for overtime. You're not going to get a draw that takes you halfway down the field for a touchdown. It just seems incredibly unlikely. The Ravens know you're not throwing the ball. It's 31 seconds left after a Trubisky sack. Just kneel. It's okay. You don't have to run a play. So a situation where they were in no danger, where they were going to get to overtime, unless they really screwed something up. They put themselves in a situation where they almost lost the game because the Ravens got the ball back with 12 seconds left on their own 44-yard line. They ran a screen to Mike Wallace. Inexplicably, it was over the middle of the field. I guess they thought they could spike it, but they obviously could not. If the Ravens going to play out of bounds, they have maybe the best kicker in football with a shot at a 57-yard field goal to win this game. So it was bizarre to me to see that they made that decision. I will note neither of us seem to think that the Chiefs' decision to go for it on 4th and goal was an inexplicable decision. Do you think that was the right call?
You know, I had a tough time with that one. I feel like you're down 2 scores. I certainly see the case for kicking the field goal, making it a 1-possession game, but you can certainly make the case that you get down to the 4-yard line. Your offense has been struggling all day. I usually err towards the side of being aggressive in that spot. So I think if I were the coach, that's one where I probably would have been conservative and kicked the field goal. But, to say inexplicable, I saw Andy Reid's explanation after the game, and I think he kind of said what I just said, which was that they were just struggling to move the football, and they were close, and they wanted to go for it. So, in the realm of decisions that were made on Sunday, some more some crazier than others. That's one that I can kind of live with.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily a bad call by any means, given the context. They were more effective moving the ball afterwards, and if they'd been better on offense, you would figure maybe, okay, give it a shot, kick a field goal, come away with points, make it a one-score game, but it did seem like they were really struggling to move the football. What about the least impressive victory on Sunday?
This was a tough one because it was a day in which teams, I felt like, built leads around the league and then let opponents come back, and some held on for victories, some lost. So this one might not be totally fair, but I had to pick one, and I'm going to go with Washington. They came in second in DVOA. They built a 17-0 lead at home against the San Francisco 49ers. They let the 49ers come back. It's tied at the start of the fourth quarter, 17-17, which is one thing. Then they go up 26-17. You figure, all right, they're putting this game away. But then kind of a second time, they let the 49ers come back into it. They totally bust the coverage, giving up a 45-yard touchdown to Aldrick Robinson. And then on the final drive, the 49ers, they drove all the way to the Washington 40-yard line, and then there was what I thought was a bogus offensive pass interference call on Pierre Garçon. They were just running that slant flat route combination. Yep. I thought Garçon kind of turned around and was looking for the ball. It's not his job to get out of the way of the defender. He got hit with offensive pass interference, which kind of knocked them out of field goal range. But, man, if that call goes the other way or it's a no call and they pick up another 5 yards or something, they are in position to really steal that game. So, I know the 49ers have played a lot of teams tough. I think this is now, 5 straight games that they've lost by 3 points or less. So I'm not saying they're a pushover by any means, but just kind of the way that game flowed and the way it ended up, I thought Washington kind of was unimpressive there, not being able to put them away.
Yeah, I do think that if you're going to call that slant flat combo pass interference, then I would say about 30% of the plays in the NFL right now are going to be pass interference. I mean, that route combination is in every playbook in football, and you see teams run that route combo several times per game. Should it be pass interference? I guess it could be, but it's not called that way in the NFL these days. So I did think that was a pretty bogus call. I'm going to say the Patriots, in terms of this scenario, they're playing on the road. Granted, they're playing the Jets, who I know their record is good. The Jets have not looked very good this year, and they've beaten some pretty bad football teams. They had to win with that Austin Seferian-Jenkins call, which I think most people agree is pretty bad. How bad is this pass defense where even if you have Stephon Gilmore out, Josh McCown is throwing for 354 yards against you, and not like garbage time yards where they're just trying to catch up, like 354 meaningful yards against you. It really says a lot about just how questionable this Patriots defense is and what little they have to offer. And they looked a little bit better against the Bucs, but man, when you're getting torn up by Josh McCown, Jermaine Kearse, Travaris Cadet, Seferian-Jenkins, Matt Forte, I mean, it really is kind of scary.
Yeah, I don't know what the fix is, and I feel like every week a tweet comes across my timeline that Bill Belichick has yanked one cornerback and started another one.
Yeah.
I don't know how many have started at this point, but they're clearly trying to shuffle personnel, and nothing's working. I don't know what their answer is, whether they make a move before the trade deadline, or if they have something schematically they can do, or you feel like they've tried everything on that front. So, absolutely worrisome. I think they were 32nd in defensive DVOA, really by any statistical measure coming into this week, and nothing really about that performance suggests, that they're moving in the right direction.
Well, just got a tweet coming across my timeline from Ian Rappaport that said, Senior Vice President of Officiating Al Riveron reviewed the Jets' non-touchdown play. He made the call Sunday and is comfortable with it today, and Tony Corrente agreed. So that settles it. Obviously, it was a good call.
It was obvious, Bill. I don't even know why we're discussing it here. I can't think of a more clear play, really, from the entire weekend. I know we don't have that as a category today. Maybe next time I'm on, we can do most obvious call of the weekend, and we can point to something like that, because it was just so obvious.
I appreciate that. That's very fair. What about most underappreciated moment of week 6?
Man. Ravens fans are going to be mad at me for piling on them today, but Joe Flacco going 3 yards, a full 3 yard fill past the line of scrimmage,
yes,
and still attempting a pass in the fourth quarter versus the Bears. I mean, that just may have been my favorite moment of the weekend. Maybe this was personal for me because, when I used to play like backyard football,
sure,
I'm not the most fleet of foot, so I was like the guy who's pump faking like 8 yards down the field because it's my only way to try to distract a defender or get away from him. It seemed to me, I don't know what your take was on it, it seemed to me like the defender was kind of closing in on him, and if he, I don't know that he would have had time to slide in that situation, and he was going to take a pretty big hit if he just kind of covered up the football and tried to bite it and pick up the 3 yards. So instead of that, he was like, screw it, I am just chucking this ball. I don't care what happens. And I forget who caught the ball, but they were in initial disbelief at the call, which was also, just made everything so great about that play. So, yeah, I think that was my favorite and most underappreciated moment of the entire weekend.
I think that's totally fair. I agree with you. I pretty clear Joe Flacco knew what he was doing. He was scrambling on the play, and it hadn't gone well. Like I think it was third down in the red zone. They needed a touchdown, really, so I think he was going to scramble for it and realized he was not going to come close to getting it, and I guess this was the alternative. Was either crumple up in a heap and take a hit or throw the ball 3 yards away. I'm going to say Mike McCarthy, who had a rough day, obviously, with the Aaron Rodgers injury. Was not the easiest game for him, but used his challenges in the first half to overturn a 14-yard completion and then challenged a 20-yard completion in the first half. That was clearly a catch, lost that challenge, and was out of challenges for the rest of the game. And usually, you use your 2 challenges, and in the modern NFL where every turnover is getting and touchdown is getting reviewed, you're not going to have to normally use 3 challenges. But what do you know? The refs did not see that Joe McKinnon caught a pass that clearly hit the ground, bizarrely ruled a catch, and Mike McCarthy could do nothing about it. So watching McKinnon make this catch and Mike McCarthy have to fume about it, knowing there was nothing he could do, I felt like was very underappreciated. All right, Sheil, let's get to more superlatives here in a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about ZipRecruiter. Guys, I don't need to tell you that it's been a rough time for the Cleveland Browns out there. They're 0-6. Reports are they're interested in adding some folks to their front office with football experience, and I'm not an advisor to the Browns. I have no idea what they're going to do or not do. I obviously hope it works out well for them, but I do have a tip. If they're looking to find someone with experience, a qualified candidate, a great candidate, and they're looking to do it quickly, the best place to do that is with ZipRecruiter. Because with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards with just one click. They got a lot of work to do. They're probably changing quarterbacks on a weekly basis. They're probably evaluating a lot of guys. You would figure one of the best ways for them to add some help would be with just one click. And ZipRecruiter lets them do that. And then once you do that one click and you post your job, ZipRecruiter puts its smart matching technology to work, actively notifying qualified candidates about your job within minutes of posting, so you receive the best possible matches. And that's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other hiring sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on the right candidates finding you. It finds them. And you would figure ZipRecruiter is going to do the best possible job of finding them as opposed to some, I'm not going to name them, but some NFL teams. And it's no wonder 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site in just one day. And even better, everyone's trying to save money. Browns spent a lot in free agency this year. You can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free if you listen to this show. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/Barnwell, and you can post your job on ZipRecruiter with one click for free. Again, ZipRecruiter.com/Barnwell. BARNWELL. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. What about emptiest numbers? Obviously, fantasy football is great, but what about the most useless numbers in terms of generating some fantasy points on Sunday?
Yeah, this was a tough one, too, because some of the numbers where I wanted to call them empty, the team kind of came back, and it was like, it would have taken a miracle for them to win, but it wasn't totally empty. I'll go with Matthew Stafford. You talked about the Saints defense earlier, so on paper, Stafford throws for 312 yards and three touchdowns, but, this was a game where the Lions offense just cost them so many points. There was the sack in the end zone where the Saints had a touchdown. There was another fumble where a blitzer was coming there off the edge, and Stafford fumbled on that play as well. There was a tipped interception, which turned into a pick six. So they ended up battling back to 45-38, and then the player you mentioned earlier, Cam Jordan, came up with the tip pass and the pick six there. The last interception was not Stafford's fault at all. It bounced off a receiver's hands. But overall, just 5 turnovers. And I think ESPN Stats and Information had him down for 9 batted passes, which was the most that they've tracked since they started tracking this in 2009. So just a very strange game for Matthew Stafford, where they were giving the Saints just too many points, which you obviously don't need to do against a good offense like that.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking maybe Trevor Siemian, who had some numbers late, but I'm actually going to go with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who came in down 24-0, went 22 of 32 for 290 with 3 touchdowns. Those numbers sound pretty solid, but 2 picks, one of which was a pick six, and most of his yardage, you look at the game book and look at sort of the game context, and most of his yardage came down multiple scores in the second half, and with Patrick Peterson out of the game. After Patrick Peterson left, Fitz was 12 of 14 for 185, 3 touchdowns, and a pick six to Mike Evans. So I do have to think that would not have happened if Patrick Peterson had still been in the game. Ryan Fitzpatrick, of course, is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's diving for first downs, down 20 points, and that's noble, I guess, but just not a impressive performance from a Bucs team that were they got close towards the end with a couple breaks, sort of similar to the Lions-Saints game, but just was not really that impressive of a performance altogether. Let's finish up with, I think when we talked about it a little earlier, luckiest break from Sunday.
Yeah, I go back to that Steelers-Chiefs game, and it's so funny how one play could just totally change the narrative of everything that's being discussed this week. And, I had down what you mentioned earlier, which was 3:34 left. Ben Roethlisberger looks for Antonio Brown down the left sideline. I mean, Philip Gaines plays it beautifully at the beginning of the play where he gets his head around. He's in just perfect position to make the interception. The Steelers were up 12-10 at the time, and the ball just goes through his hands, hits him on the helmet. Antonio Brown comes down with it, and it ends up being a 51-yard touchdown. I mean, if you repeat that play like 10 times, that's the only time I think that is going to be the final result. And I mean, just think about if he comes down with that interception, maybe the Chiefs go ahead and kick a field goal and win that game 13-12. And we're talking about, wow, the Chiefs find a way, a second half comeback, and the Steelers are cursed and in trouble, and they blew it down the stretch. And Ben Roethlisberger with a key interception after a 5-interception game. I mean, there's just all those things we would be talking about this week. Instead, just kind of, I guess you could say, as luck would have it, it goes through his hands. Brown scores the touchdown. All of a sudden, they're up by 2 possessions there. So I want to give the Steelers credit. I thought they played well. I said that earlier. They certainly, I think, probably deserve to win that game. But when you just look at one single play out of like 120, 130, whatever the case may be, throughout the course of a game that could really change so much about what we're talking about this week, that was the one that stuck out to me.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. I was going to say the Jay Cutler interception that got wiped off. I don't know if it's lucky. I feel bad making this pun, so I don't want it to be a pun, but obviously the Vikings ended up with an entirely different game than they were expecting in terms of Aaron Rodgers' broken collarbone, which was forced on a legal hit from what I can tell early on. And then, of course, Brett Hundley came in, was not Aaron Rodgers, as you might expect. But let's finish up talking about that very briefly. What do you think about the Packers' chances now, given that it looks like Rodgers is going to be out? You would figure 6 to 8 weeks, if not with surgery, the rest of the season.
Well, I think the thing they have going for them is that the division is not strong. I mean, if you're talking about them going up against Case Keenum or even that Lions team, I'm a Packers fan today. That's where I kind of find some solace. But, I've always been of the impression that Aaron Rodgers, maybe more than any other quarterback in the NFL, has made up for weaknesses on the roster, bizarre coaching decisions, all those different types of things. I just feel like that's been the case for so many years here. He only has the one Super Bowl. I feel like he should have more, given how good he's been. over the year. So, from a personal perspective, I'm just curious to see whether my theory is correct or not, and whether this team kind of goes in the tank without one of the best quarterbacks of our time, a guy who can escape pressure and make throws that nobody else can, and bring you back when you're down with 2 minutes left, all those different things. So, if I had to make a prediction, I would think that this team is probably going to go in the tank a little bit and not be a playoff team at all. I think that's more likely than them somehow miraculously staying in the hunt and being a team in the mix for a playoff spot down the stretch. What do you think about that? I know, like I said, you wrote about it today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree. I do think that it's going to be basically, if they get lucky with the rest of the NFC North kind of cooperating with them, which is what happened in 2013. The Lions were in a great position to win the division and blew a couple games late to really mediocre teams. The Bears were then kind of in the forefront, and they had a shot at winning the division down to a 4th and 10. They had a 4th and 10 to win the division, and gave up a 40-yard touchdown on a blown coverage to Randall Cobb that ended up costing them the NFC North, and ended up really inspiring a lot of change in that regime over the next 2 years altogether. So I do think that obviously Brett Hundley's going to be an enormous drop-off. I do think he's going to be better than he was on Sunday, but it is going to take a while for him to be a competitive quarterback. I think it's really just, can we be competitive with the Saints this weekend? Can we get to our bye, and then can we install hopefully some stuff that's going to make Brett Hundley's life easier, and can we get our offensive line healthy, which obviously is a big concern for the Packers now that they're down what might be their top 6, but depending on how you count left tackle options so far this season. So, Sheil, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people check out more of what you're working on a day-to-day basis?
You can check out theathletic.com, theathletic.com/Philly. And, that's it. This was fun. I like the Superlatives format, Bill. It flew by, this podcast.
It was great. Now I'm worried that I kind of want to steal it for every podcast, but I can't because it was your idea.
You can. You have permission. As long as I get to do it when I come on, that's fine.
I promise. Sheil Kapadia, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Bill Barnwell Show. More audio coming later this week. I'll be on Wednesday's episode of the Nickel Package, and another Bill Barnwell Show previewing Week 7, for real this time, coming later on this week. But thanks so much for listening.